In this video, I'm testing Synthflow and Voiceflow in 7 areas from ease of use and telephony options to latency, pricing, and hidden costs to see which is the better platform for building voice AI agents. I'll also link to a side-by-side comparison below with all the results, and you can plug in your requirements to see which tool's the better fit for you. So let's start with Synthflow. So Synthflow is a no-code platform for building voice agents, and they've been making some pretty big changes recently. They've rolled out their Flow workflow editor, also massively overhauled their pricing, which we'll touch on at the end. But if we jump into their platform, I'll quickly show you kind of how easy it is to build voice agents on their platform. So until recently, building voice agents in Synthflow meant you had to add everything into a single prompt. Now you can build agents in their Flow Designer. Now this is in beta. I personally find it a little bit buggy, but you can see where this is going. And the benefits of doing it this way is not only is it more intuitive visually to see all the different routes, but there's also some latency benefits doing it this way. But as I say, this is still kind of in beta and it still has a few rough edges. But as you can see, like most visual voice agent platforms, you've got this nice kind of canvas over here, and you can add your nodes by just clicking here. You can enter your prompts in here, and we've got all the kind of expected nodes. You can do call transfers, you can add conditionals where we have these different routes, and you can also trigger tools. I think they're called actions in Synthflow. So like most tools, you need to build your actions separately, and then you can kind of connect them in here. Now, where Synthflow is quite different to other tools is that because it's primarily designed for no code, Synthflow has quite an impressive range of native integrations. So you've got Zapier and Mate.com, which effectively mean you can connect your Synthflow agent into literally thousands of other tools. Got a Go high level integration, Cal.com, which means you can connect it to Google Calendar. Then we got a couple of CRMs. So this is really nice because it means if you don't have a developer or you're not comfortable messing around with webhooks and MCP servers, you can still connect your voice agent into other systems that you might be using very quickly. And of course, if you do want to connect this into tools using code, you can. Like, it still has a decent API. You just have these options available if you are non-technical. So let's talk about telephony, and then we'll go on to voice realism. So inside Synthflow, you can buy phone numbers. So they're $1.50 a month. These can only be US, Canadian, or Australian numbers. So if, like myself, you're outside of those countries, you will probably need to import your phone numbers again. And you can do that the usual ways via something like Twilio or Telnix or via SipTrunk. One downside in Synthflow is that you can't test your agents directly in the platform without buying a phone number. So it has to actually call your phone, which is a bit annoying, but I think that's something that is going to change soon because, as you can see up here, when you click test, we've got this option down here called simulation and it says coming soon. So potentially by the time this video is out, that will not be the case. But as it stands right now, you either need to chat with your agent via text or have it actually call your phone number, which means it needs to have a phone number connected to it. So in terms of voice, we've got usual options available. The default voice engine is 11 Labs, as you'd expect, and you can either import your voice if you've created one on 11 Labs, or you can clone it directly from the platform by uploading some audio files. From some of the testing I've done with Synthflow, I'd say the voice configuration is not quite as natural to some of the other tools, but it's still pretty good. And you've obviously got a huge amount of control down here to tweak that and get it to a point where you're happy with it. So let's talk about concurrency. So by default, you get 5 concurrent phone lines, which is not a huge amount. For most businesses, that's going to be fine. But if you get busy periods or you're doing large outbound call campaigns, you're potentially going to need more than that. Now, latency is an area where I've got a few gripes with Synthflow. So from my testing, I was getting a huge range of latency. This was a standardized latency test. So I used the same prompts and the same models across a bunch of tools. And Synthflow had the slowest latency at around 1 second. More to the point though, the thing that particularly bothers me is that unless I'm being really silly, and let me know in the comments if I am, I couldn't find this number anywhere in the platform. I had to actually work out the latency by measuring the time between the different waveforms. Now, I would expect to see it in either the analytics section, which I can't see anywhere, or in the call logs, which again, I can't see anything here telling me the latency. So to me, this is just a bit of a red flag. So let's now move on to pricing. And this is a bit of a moving target because Synthflow has just made some huge changes to their pricing. Until about 2 months ago, Synthflow was one of the few tools where you could pay a fixed monthly plan. But like most voice agent tools, they've moved over to pay-as-you-go, which personally I much prefer because if you have lumpy call volume, it means you're not kind of underpaying and then overpaying. Also means there's an incentive to improve your agent's efficiency by using different models, etc. So generally speaking, Synthflow is not the most affordable. In fact, let me go to Voice AI Guide. This is going to be a little bit easier to compare. So Synthflow is this third column here. And you can see that for about 3,000 call minutes per month, we'd be looking at around about $423 a month, whereas alternatives, we can sort of shave off $30 or what's that, about $150 a month for this would be VAPI. And you can see the breakdown of where that falls here. Now, this is an estimate. This is not exact because we're essentially trying to convert tokens into minutes into dollars here, which is imprecise. And all of this is going to be affected by what models you use for text to speech, speech to text, the LLM models. If you want a more precise option, you can go to Synthflow's pricing page and enter in exactly what you would use. But generally speaking, it is not the most affordable option, but you're essentially paying a premium for the fact that it's no code. You've got those pre-built integrations, and it's essentially reducing the time that it's going to take you to build an agent and get it into production. So next up, let's have a look at Voiceflow. So Voiceflow is a platform for building customer service AI agents. And there's two parts to this. There's the kind of the voice agent part and then also chat agents. And so in Voiceflow, you're building an agent that can be used either as a chatbot embedded on a website, or it can be run as a voice agent. I mention this because when you start building stuff in Voiceflow, it becomes quickly apparent that some features are more designed for the chat agents. So building voice agents is pretty straightforward, and a nice feature is you can just enter in a prompt and it's going to build out an agent workflow around that. So if we go into an agent I've previously built, you can see this nice canvas where you can build out your agents on. And building out these flows is pretty straightforward. You can just drag and drop to add agents. I personally don't love that you have to kind of double click into these to configure your agent. So you have to click on it once, then you have to click that, and then you pop your prompts in here and you can change things like the model. But credit where it's due, Voiceflow's got a decent amount of native integrations. You can see up here, we've got things like Make.com, HubSpot, Airtable, Google Sheets, Gmail, and then we can also connect this into MCP servers, webhooks, etc. In general, it's a pretty powerful platform that's pretty easy to use. In terms of testing your agents, similar to a lot of tools, you can simulate a call in the platform.
Connor, an AI agent that will demonstrate some key concepts in Voiceflow. In this step, I'll demo how you can use exit conditions to navigate the conversation based on the user's intention.
So I personally don't find the voice realism in Voiceflow quite as good as some of the alternatives. It sounds a little bit more robotic. One area where I have been surprisingly impressed by Voiceflow is latency. So when I ran the standardized latency test on Voiceflow, it was only slightly slower than VAPI, which is pretty incredible considering that VAPI is basically just the voice AI infrastructure. So Voiceflow beat both Retail AI and Synthflow by quite a decent margin. I would like to see a little bit more in the way of metrics and stats that kind of highlight this. They don't make that quite as visible as some of the other platforms. But if you do run a test, you can see the real-time latency in the logs, as well as your credit usage, which I really like. It's really nice to be able to see this breakdown here while you're testing. Now, telephony options, if we go back into the dashboard, you can go to phone numbers and you can add phone numbers here from the dashboard. Unlike some of the other platforms, you don't get any free numbers with Voiceflow, so you will need to import your phone numbers from another platform. For me, this is not a deal breaker because I kind of have to do this anyway, regardless of what platform I'm using, because I generally need UK numbers. And the platforms that do give you free numbers, generally it's only a US or a Canadian one. Plus, they generally have restrictions on them around things like outbound calling. So not a deal breaker, but it's quite nice to get the free numbers just when you're testing. So it's one less thing that you have to do. So a few other things that are just worth being aware of. When it comes to concurrency, it's going to depend on what plan you're on. So by default on the Pro plan, which is $60 a month, you get 5 concurrent phone lines. Then when you go up to the business plan, you get 15, and then enterprise, presumably it's whatever you negotiate. Now, while we're talking about pricing, Voiceflow is a fairly interesting one because as you can see here, we've got these kind of flat monthly pricing plans. But really what's going on here is you still have an amount of credits. So you can see we've got 10,000 credits, but there's no monthly rollover. The long and short of this is that if you actually use the amount of credits that you buy, then Voiceflow is very affordable. It comes out to around about 8 cents per minute, which is pretty much as low as you can possibly get at the moment for building a voice agent. However, the quirk around the monthly rollover means that, for example, if you only used half your credits one month, you're effectively paying double that amount, which means that's quite a lot more expensive than some of the alternatives. So it all comes down to whether you're actually going to use the amount of credits that you're buying. One little hack you could do is pay for an annual plan, and then you don't have to worry about the monthly rollover. You could also get a lower number of credits in the annual plan, so you kind of definitely use them up. But it's a little bit of a weird way of doing pricing. I wouldn't be surprised if they eventually change it, because most of the other voice agent platforms start with this kind of pricing and then eventually go to pay-as-you-go because of that reason. So both of these are great options for building voice agents on, and given that you can try both of them out for free, I'd recommend doing that to see which one's going to be a better fit for your use case. Now, I'll drop links to both of them below, as well as the side-by-side comparison I put together. And if you'd like to watch me live build the same voice agent on both platforms, as well as 4 other voice AI tools, and then live test them with real phone calls, you can check that video out here.